Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. I am Luke Lipinski.
And I'm Doug Kemp.
On this week's show, the Ducks quack back and the stage is set for a potentially epic Game 7 in Boston.
It's that time of the year. What time is that, you may ask? Playoff and tournament time. And time for us to take another look at the AHL's Calder Cup Playoffs, the IIHF World Championship, and the upcoming Memorial Cup.
All that. Plus, we found Alex Ovechkin. Let's drop the puck on episode 40. Here we go, Doug.
Where are we going?
We're going on to round number 3 in the Stanley Cup Playoffs of 2014.
Not yet. We're almost there.
No, actually, we're not there in any series yet. First of all, let me just ask pleasantly how you're doing.
I'm doing fine, Luke. How are you doing? Better than you, because I'm not a Penguins fan.
Yeah, well, it didn't take you long. What was that, 9 seconds before you got in there?
Actually, 32.
Oh, well, look at you. You can count. Before we get into any of the pain that I have endured for the last 7 days, really at this point, for the sole purpose of providing content for this podcast, because if it wasn't for this podcast, I think I would have just left the country.
Come on, it's not that bad.
Oh, it's bad. This is episode number 40.
Yes, it is, and it's time for the silly game.
And by silly, you mean brilliant.
Brilliant, that's right.
So, who you got?
Well, there's only one number 40 for me, even though he's on a team that I'm not a big fan of, Henrik Zetterberg.
That's a good answer. How about Tuukka Rask?
Nah, you got me.
Yeah, you were not prepared for Tuukka Rask.
I still think Henrik Zetterberg's better.
Tuukka Rask just gave up 4 goals tonight. What better night to honor him in this game?
So Henrik's better.
You can hear us on iTunes, TuneIn, YouTube, SoundCloud, Podbean. I can't think of anybody else.
Did you get YouTube in there?
YouTube?
Yep.
I think I got YouTube.
Google Plus.
Google Plus. We have our own cable access channel now, or is that not happening
That's
yet?
Next.
Okay.
Henrik Zetterberg, Conn Smythe winner in 2008.
Oh, I'm not going to argue against Zetterberg, but Tuukka Rask, for my money, is the
third
best
runner-up.
goalie
Third runner-up, number 40.
Alex Tanguay.
Ooh, that was a good one.
I had that just chambered. I don't even know where that came from.
Patrick Lalime.
Former Penguin.
Yeah.
There you go.
See?
Before we get into this, if you could pick the 4 teams that you want to be the Final Four this year, who would they be? We got 8 teams left. All these series, as we speak,
Who do I want?
are going into Game 7 or Game 6.
Anaheim.
Okay.
Chicago.
Okay.
Montreal.
You're thinking really hard about these, okay?
Montreal.
Okay.
Penguins.
Okay. I want Pittsburgh, Montreal, Anaheim, Minnesota. So we're about the same, except you want Chicago, I want Minnesota. And I say this only...
How do I think it's going to end up?
Well, based on what I have seen and how I feel about the world right now, I would assume it's going to be the exact opposite of what I want. So at least you'll get Chicago.
Yeah, it's going to be Minnesota, L.A., Montreal, New York.
Well, here we go. We're starting with Pittsburgh, New York. Can we just get this out of the way now I can focus?
Okay, let's start in the East.
All right. What do you got? Series is now 3-3.
I said the series was going to go 7. And,
so did I.
And, so you've got to give New York credit, man. They've got that guy, Mr. Lundqvist. And this time of year, you need goaltending.
Before we get into this and I lose my mind and you may have to do the rest of the show by yourself.
Okay.
Self-admitted Penguins fan.
Yep. It's been clear since day one.
They were up 3-1 when we recorded this podcast last episode. They looked good. They were playing good hockey all the way around, good defense. Fleury was actually playing good in goal. As I said that night, I reserve the right to rip into him if he suddenly just turns around and goes into Fleury playoff guy, which he's done. But before we get into all that, I will say this. As much as I want Pittsburgh to win, it was cool to see Martin St. Louis score on Mother's Day, and also for the Rangers to get that win that very first night back, for him. That was cool, just as far as a hockey story. Martin St. Louis, a very good guy, and he's done a lot for this league. That was cool to see. I now lead into this question for you. I was going to ask you this last week, and I probably should have. We saw San Jose just completely melt down, up 3-0 against San Jose, or against Los Angeles. You can make a case they lost to themselves, actually. Are teams more likely in a year when that happens to kind of have that sort of instinct to put other teams away when they're up 3-0 or 3-1? We really haven't seen a whole lot of other 3-0s. But my thought is, if you're on a team, and we'll use Pittsburgh as the example here because they were the only team that was up 3-1, you don't have to look more than a week back to see another team that was up 3-0, came out flat in Game 4, and then lost the whole series. So wouldn't you think teams in this year's playoffs would be much more likely to finish other teams off when they had the chance?
Yeah, I think that sometimes coaches outcoach themselves and, put the power together. I mean, Crosby and Malkin should be getting a lot of ice time together right now, and they're not.
Well, you mentioned that last week.
Yeah, and it works. It works.
It works for a lot of reasons.
So if you do that and you do it consistently, then I think the series is done.
Well, I mean, Pittsburgh came out flat to start Game 5. There's no denying that. And then I didn't think they came out that bad in Game 6. I don't think Fleury played well to start Game 6. And you're in a tough position when you are facing a team who has a goaltender like Henrik Lundqvist and you're spotting them 2-0 leads 5 minutes in. Because what are you going to do? You have to score at least 3 goals to beat Lundqvist now. You have to score at least 3 goals on Lundqvist to beat a Rangers team that nothing against them, but if you just go roster, take the goalies off, they're the worst team left of the 8 teams. Agreed?
Yeah, they've got so much, and we've talked about it all season long. They've got so much talent, and the talent just doesn't produce on a consistent basis.
But they don't have talent compared to Pittsburgh or Boston or Montreal or Anaheim or Chicago.
No, they don't. They're the weaker of the 8. If you're going to look at it and compare it that way, I absolutely agree 100%. But you're right. When you give another team a 2-0 lead, all you've done is said, here's a big bucket of confidence. It's all yours.
Well, can you buy a nice bucket of confidence at your local grocery store?
Only in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Well, apparently they've been exporting it all to New York because the Rangers were pretty much up against the ropes after Game 4 when we did the show last week. They were booed off the ice by their own fans, who magically like them now again, I noticed, by Game 6. Where did that come from?
I actually, after that last game, thought it was over. I thought Pittsburgh was going to win the other night, and the series was done. I really did.
Well, I said on the show last week it wasn't over, and we both picked Pittsburgh in 7, I believe.
Yeah, even though I picked Pittsburgh in 7, I had a kind of a weird feeling that Pittsburgh was just going to wrap it up.
They looked good.
And they looked good, and then...
And I'm not going to change my pick, but I don't see a way Pittsburgh wins this game at this point.
Game 7?
Yeah. It goes... if the series was, hey, Pittsburgh's up 1-0, now New York's up 2-1, now Pittsburgh's up 3-2, New York ties it, that's different. New York has all the momentum.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Fleury's completely melted down again. He can't just have one bad game. It just bleeds right into the next game. So I shouldn't say he's completely melted down, but he's not making simple saves.
Okay.
And so I can't picture a way New York doesn't score at least 3 goals in Game 7. Which means if you're the Penguins, you have to put 4 goals behind Henrik Lundqvist to advance. I don't like that.
Those aren't good odds.
No.
I still think Pittsburgh wins.
Okay, so then what's your score? Because if Pittsburgh wins, it's going to have to be 3-2 is probably Pittsburgh's best case scenario. They got to play defense like they did in Games 3 and Games 4. Fleury's got to play the way he did in Games 3 and Games 4. It doesn't have to be spectacular. He just has to not let goals that wouldn't go in against any of these other goalies that are still in the playoffs go in.
Well, I just think that I saw a lot of mistakes in last night's game on the defensive end.
That's fair.
I really did. So that won't be hard to tighten up.
It will be if everybody's not playing, though.
Having Brooks Orpik out doesn't help the cause.
It really doesn't.
But I saw a lot of defensive breakdowns. I saw a lot of guys out of position. I saw guys chasing. I think it's a lot easier to shore that up. And if you can shore that up in, let's say, the first 20 minutes and Fleury settles in that first 20 minutes, you're probably looking at a 2-1 game.
I think the first period tomorrow night probably decides this game in a lot of ways. Because if Pittsburgh goes out there on home ice and gets up, they have a much better chance. But I don't have any confidence in that. And it doesn't matter if I have confidence. What matters is if the forwards don't have confidence in their goalie, whether they say they do or not, and then they're not playing to try and score goals. They're just playing to try and be perfect in front of their netminder.
Well, it's a team game, and it's the playoffs, and everybody's got to play together. So whether the forwards, have confidence here, confidence there, that's not the point. The point is the defense made mistakes, and they have to correct those mistakes. And if they can just, focus, make sure they don't make the same mistakes, and they are on home ice, and they get the crowd behind them, pop an early goal, I think it's a 2-1 final. I really do.
I'll just throw this out there as my last argument. the last 4 years since Pittsburgh has won the Stanley Cup, here's how they went out of the playoffs, okay? Last year they got swept by Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals, so 4 straight losses to go out. Mm-hmm. And my argument here is that once they kind of get losing in the playoffs, for whatever reason, they don't bounce back anymore. Year before, they lose 4-2 to Philadelphia. And I'm not trying to pile on Fleury, but his goals against average was 4.63. And his save percentage was .834. And Pittsburgh was the highest scoring team in the first round and didn't make it out of the first round. Year before, they're up 3-1 on Tampa Bay in the first round. They lose 4-3. The turning point, Game 5, they lose 8-2. And then the year before that, they lose to Montreal 4-3. That was the year Yaroslav Halak was.
Well, this year they're going to win 4-3.
But either way, they keep going out by losing 3 or 4 games in a row. That's not – you got to have some more resiliency than that, don't you?
Well, absolutely you have to. So like I said, I mean, I thought the big thing last night was the back end, and it's a matter of not repeating the mistakes. This team is talented enough. It's deep enough. Having one of your top defenders out doesn't help you. But with that said, they have enough depth on that bench where they should be able to survive it.
We'll get off the Pittsburgh series after this last question I have for you, because you're fairly neutral on this. Mm-hmm. If Pittsburgh loses this series and they go out again, and this is now 5 straight years where it's not like it's easy.
Well, they're in the
to
second round.
That's fine. But it's 5 straight years where they haven't made it back to the Stanley Cup with this lineup that a lot of people think is one of the best. In terms of just, let's say, the last 25 years, this pains me to say, but is this one of the more underachieving teams?
I don't think so.
Really?
No, I really don't. I think that you're close to the subject matter. I also think that the NHL every year, talent-wise and competitive-wise, just gets better and better and better. I look at clubs like Minnesota. I look at clubs like the Phoenix Coyotes. They don't have superstars, but they can compete. They can compete with the Pittsburghs. They can compete with the Bostons. They can compete with the Montreal. Yes, Phoenix isn't in the playoffs, but Minnesota is in the playoffs, and Minnesota is giving Chicago a run for their money. And that team, yes, I know they got Zach Parise and Suter and stuff, but that's only 2 guys. They don't have a bench as deep as Anaheim. They don't have a bench as deep as Pittsburgh, but they're competing, and they're in every game they step on the ice.
But
I think that's just the parity.
That's just the league now?
I don't like the word parity, but I think that's just the league. The teams are becoming so talented, especially on the west side of the country, but the teams are just so talented that it's harder to win now.
Well, you mentioned Phoenix. I mean, 2 years ago, they go to the Western Conference Finals.
Right.
With that same kind of just balanced all-around attack, but I don't know. I mean, if I had to pick, San Jose is obviously the underachievers of this kind of generation because they put that lineup together and they've never been to the Cup.
Right. And, how many times is San Jose going to get to the playoffs and not get out of the first round?
Probably quite a few. They've already done it quite a few times.
You look, again, styles of hockey. I look at Nashville. Nashville always made the playoffs except for this season, but they never went deep, mainly because they had a team that was top to bottom, everybody. They didn't have superstars, but they were always competitive. They were never a not competitive team. They were never an Edmonton Oiler of last year.
Didn't take you long to get your shot in on the Edmonton Oilers either. On a podcast about the 2 conference semifinals, you found a way to take a shot at the Edmonton Oilers. Well, slide over to Boston, Montreal. Best series of the playoffs at this point.
Absolutely, hands down.
They're going to Game 7.
Game 7, Montreal 4-0.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't see that coming. I did not see that coming. I expected Montreal to push this series. Actually, I had Boston in 6. I think you had Boston in 7.
Montreal in 7.
You had Montreal in 7.
But I right in this exact moment, do like Boston on their home ice. But either way, Montreal pushed the Bruins, and they easily could win. Well, it was 4-0. I mean, the 4th one was an empty netter, but it counts against Rask because he hadn't gotten all the way off the ice yet. I mean, it was a close game for most. All these games have been close. I mean, Game 4 was 1-0 in overtime.
Right.
So it's just been a fantastic series. I don't know that there's a team this year that looks great, and we'll get into the 2 Western Conference series in a moment, but Chicago hasn't really been that impressive to me either, and yet they could very well go back to the Stanley Cup. Boston seems to be as close as we're going to get to a great team this year, and yet they could be out in 2 days.
Yeah, I mean, look.
Well, I mean, I didn't expect that to be your final answer.
I was just getting all choked up because
It is emotional.
Our prediction on Montreal from the beginning of the season has been spot on.
We have, even going into the playoffs, we both said Montreal is the team. Just kind of looking at like the odds to make to the Stanley Cup. Montreal had the longest odds of any really good team. And you could tell they were just flying under the radar among just the viewing public. Everybody, for whatever reason, everybody in the West saw St. Louis and Chicago as your two teams, and everybody in the East saw Boston or Pittsburgh as your two teams, which is kind of a lack of respect for LA, first of all. But Montreal is everything we said they were going to be. PK Subban doesn't let up. Max Pacioretty is scoring now. And Thomas Vanek is by far the best move at the trade deadline.
And another guy that doesn't get a lot of due is Douglas Murray.
Yeah, just across the board. They are just
You go down that roster, it's just a solid roster of good hockey players. And that pickup, the Vanek pickup, is what made them turn the corner.
I guess LA fans would say Gaborik was a pretty good trade too, but
Gaborik was a good pickup.
Those were the two, and Montreal didn't have to give up anything to get Thomas Vanek.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what he does in the offseason, because there was all that talk that he was pretty much a lock to go to Minnesota. Obviously, Minnesota's playing very well right now, but if Montreal continues to win, it's going to be tough for him to leave.
Well, especially when he gets a ring. You know, if let's say hypothetically Montreal gets a ring, then what do you do?
It's really tough to leave at that point. But also your paycheck goes up, whether you stay or not. Either Montreal is going to have to fork over a ton of cash to keep Thomas Vanek, or there's plenty of other teams, and we'll get more into this in future shows when we get closer to free agency.
Well, the rumor was he wanted to go back to Minnesota.
Yeah, I think it's either Minnesota or Montreal at this point. But there's not a lot of scoring forwards that are going to be available this year. Vanek's the top of the list. And so he's gonna cash in pretty well.
Yeah, but I mean, even while we're on the subject, I mean, if they do well, and I'm Thomas Vanek, I got to sit down and go, wait a minute, I can make some coin here. There's a good core here. There's no reason why they wouldn't repeat in getting back to the playoffs next year.
Yeah, they got good young talent on the team as well with Brendan Gallagher and Alex Galchenyuk. Canadians 6-0.
Oh, wow, that was good.
When scoring first in these playoffs. How's that for a stat? 1-3 when not scoring first. This is it. I mean, this Game 7, obviously Boston has more than proven themselves. They won the Stanley Cup a couple years ago. They got within, 17 seconds of going to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup last year. They're already proven. But Montreal, this is the test. They have so much more to gain in Game 7, I think. But it's so tough to beat Boston in Boston.
How about how much of an upset is it?
If Montreal wins?
Yeah.
I don't think it's an upset. I think they are the worst team for Boston to play. I think if Boston gets past them, it's not smooth sailing. I mean, it's going to be tough from here on out. But I really like Boston's chances if they get past Montreal. I just think it's the toughest matchup Boston could get in a lot of ways. They've got that goalie that matches up. They've got defense that is not as good as Boston, but is still able to have a huge impact on the game. I know a lot of it is Subban, but they've got other good defensemen as well. And when they add Vanek into that mix, they've got a few different forwards who can
Baby
score.
Bork's on that team too.
See, there you go. Baby Bork?
Yeah.
I don't think he likes that name. What an awful, awful nickname.
You're listening to the Hockey Podcast. Feel free to email comments or questions to the show at our email address, thehockeypodcast@gmail.com.
Segment 2, here we go. Doug, I feel very liberated now.
Why is that?
We got segment 1 out of the way. That kind of felt like therapy. I should have been laying on that couch doing the show. Next week.
I'll sit next to you with a pad of paper.
Yeah, next week, just write down my wrong predictions while I lay there on that couch and cry myself to...
Lay on the couch and I'll give you a bottle of bourbon and you'll be all set.
Are they sponsoring the show?
Bottle of bourbon?
Yeah. It's probably not even a bourbon company. It's probably like a
No,
like a
if we're
drywall
going to get a
company.
bourbon sponsor, maybe Maker's 46,
Are you just fishing for sponsors?
Buffalo Trace, Four Roses.
You know how in like the European like hockey leagues they wear all the advertising on their jerseys, like it just covers their jersey?
Yes.
Is there any way we could set this up where you and I just wear product names all over our jersey or shirts while we do the show and we get money for that?
But nobody would see it.
I don't care. What does that matter? Now that you've said that, it's going to be harder to do it.
Yes,
but,
it will be harder to do it.
well, you will not be in charge of marketing. Let's start with Anaheim, LA.
Okay.
The series as we speak is 2-2. You will give me credit. I said in a different platform out there after game 1 that LA would go up 2-0 and Anaheim would come back and win the series. And
yes, you did say that.
They have not won the series yet, but the score is 4-1 tonight. It's definitely turned. It's 4-2, I'm sorry, right at the end of the second. So LA has scored. But either way, Anaheim's gotten to Jonathan Quick for 4 goals. They chased him from game 4, which isn't really fair because he gave up 2 goals in the first period, but Daryl Sutter implied after the game that Quick was kind of pulled to send a message to the team that wasn't playing well in front of him. And then they responded by playing excellent. But at that point, they were already down 2-0, and that was kind of it for that game. This has been a crazy series because at the end of game 4, we had Martin Jones in net for LA and John Gibson in net for Anaheim, which is not what you would have expected 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and the rookie's playing tonight.
And he's playing very well. As I mentioned, LA didn't tie, but they got their second goal late in the second. Marian Gaborik again. That's his 7th goal of these playoffs. But at this point, John Gibson has stopped 26 of 28 shots through 2 periods. Had a shutout in his first ever playoff game in Game 4. I guess this is their guy going forward.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to change now.
But how just crazy is that? How gutty is that to put an unproven rookie in? I know he's the top-rated goalie prospect in all of hockey, but to put him in Game 4 where if you're Anaheim and you lose that game and you're down 3-1 to LA, that's probably it.
Well, Hiller was not looking good at all.
But his numbers haven't been bad in the playoffs.
His numbers have been strong. Anderson got hurt.
Hiller's gone, right? I mean, he's a free agent at the end of this year. There's no way he comes back now.
Yeah, I mean, because you just said it. They're going to go forward with Gibby. He's going to be their guy. There's no way. It's like baseball, you ride the hot pitcher, you're going to ride the hot goalie.
Yeah, you'd like to have just one goalie going into the playoffs. They don't have that luxury, but they do have the luxury of having
for
three
a young goalie to have confidence like that. That's great.
It kind of reminds me of Jonathan Quick a couple of years ago. Quick was obviously more established at that point, but
sure.
Still. What do you think of them pulling Quick in Game 4? I mean, obviously he's the sort of guy that can handle it and realizes.
I think Coach said it best. It wasn't so much Jonathan; it was the guys in front of him. Here's the message: your crutch is now gone. I've taken your crutch away. Now you're going to play hockey. All right. My oldest son has a coach, and I've seen him do it. The team will be playing horrible. Beginning of the second period, he'll pull his goalie, and the 5 guys have to skate the rest of the game with no goalie.
And they don't even get a 6th guy? They just get no goalie?
No goalie.
That's hardcore. That's John Tortorella stuff right there.
The message, though, is if you're not going to play,
you don't get a goalie.
You don't get a goalie.
Well, here's how they responded. LA.
So I actually like the move.
It wasn't a bad move, and Martin Jones has been good this year, but here's the numbers. I don't know if you saw this or not. And you'll notice I've brought at least one stat from each series so far. So
because you're a stat guy.
Yay me. Anaheim was up 2-0 after the first period. They got 3 shots the rest of the game. And they still won because of that bad first period by LA. Not just that they gave up 11 shots. That's not bad, but they were good scoring chances. But they pull quick. Martin Jones sees 3 shots over the next 40 minutes.
I think message was received.
Message now apparently didn't carry over to tonight because Anaheim's up 4-2 right now. But in that game, there's only certain teams that can do that. Only Daryl Sutter and a few other coaches can do that. Only a team that's won the Cup like LA can handle it, and only a goalie like Jonathan Quick isn't going to get rattled by it.
Yeah, but going into tonight's game, they weren't given a challenge. In the game, when a goalie's pulled, the challenge is the gauntlet's been thrown down right in front of you.
Yeah.
Today, you had to be prepared, and as a coach, you're hoping it's going to carry over.
Is the streak that LA was on coming off of San Jose, I know that just numerically it's been broken, but is that kind of just a thing of the past? Because that was my thinking when I said LA will go up 2-0 because they still have that momentum from San Jose, but once Anaheim beats them, Anaheim to me is the better team. Not by much, but they're going to swing all the momentum back and be able to take over the series.
Well, I think Anaheim going into the series and the way the series started, you said it best on the last show. You said, thanks, San Jose.
Well, yeah.
But law of averages say that's going to stop. And it did.
And it's now stopped in a big way, assuming Anaheim holds on in the third period tonight.
Yeah, you still got 20 minutes to go, and the way L.A. has been playing, you can't rule L.A. out.
No, and even if they lose this game, you can't rule them out.
No.
But if things hold the way they are right now, Anaheim has not only stabbed that.
No, I'm not. Okay.
They've won 3. Please tell me we're not recording right now. No, you're just losing your mind. Okay.
The no is just Ringo Starr popped in my head.
That was Ringo Starr?
Yeah, no. I'm not going to do it anymore. You don't remember the no song?
No, and you're still doing it. More.
Sorry.
You said you're not going to do it anymore, and then here you are. So I don't even remember who you had in that series. I had Anaheim in 6. I don't know if that's going to happen, but
I had Anaheim in 7.
Yeah, you've had Anaheim winning the Stanley Cup since about week 1 of
I
this
do.
season. Chicago
and I'm earning fantasy points.
Minnesota, are you?
Yes.
Because they're winning the games, but your team doesn't move up in the standings. Is it all the guys you don't have that score?
Yeah, pretty much.
You have all of Anaheim except Cam Fowler.
Like Perry hasn't scored tonight, but Bobino has, so I got that point.
Slowly inching your way back up.
Yeah.
Fortunately for you, I have Subban.
Yes, I know.
Minnesota and Chicago. This series has been much better than I thought. I'm not usually wrong. In fact,
I'm not usually wrong. Ooh,
No.
pat yourself on the back.
I mean, can you think of a time in the 6 years you've known me where I've ever been wrong?
Yes.
Oh, because this might be the first. I had Chicago rolling in this series, and I still think they're going to win. They may win in 6 still, but Minnesota, as they've done all season, has really shown me something. 2 just solid home wins. They've been so good at home in these playoffs, but they're not so good on the road.
I had Chicago in 7.
All right.
And I picked Chicago in 7 because Chicago has looked flat
Still.
since the playoffs started. I watch them play and I'm going, this isn't Chicago. So let me throw this out to you. The series is now
3-2 Chicago.
3-2 Chicago.
By virtue of a 2-1 win in Game 5.
Series leaders.
Ooh. Okay. Go ahead.
Goals.
You're going to make me guess?
Guess.
I would say Parise.
How about Brian Bickle?
He always shows up in the playoffs. You don't see him for the first 82. You know what Brian Bickle is? He's the guy that Toronto overspends on next year. That's who Brian Bickle is.
But he's the goal leader for Chicago. Okay, so now
He always
hang
shows up
on.
in the playoffs.
Yeah, but still.
Okay.
Where's this guy Sharp? Where's this guy Kane?
Sharp's getting stopped on breakaways.
Where's that Taves guy?
He's too busy being the greatest captain ever, or whatever we're calling it.
It's
now.
almost like Pittsburgh West.
Yeah, in a way. But I think you have to give credit to Minnesota. I think just defensively, they don't give up shots on goal. On home ice, they don't give up shots on goal. On the road, they've struggled in these playoffs. Their only road win, if I'm remembering correctly, was Game 7 in overtime against Colorado. But they're undefeated at home. And it's timely goal scoring and just stifling defense. And I don't even know if it...
Timely as in you score the last goal that gives you more than the other team?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they beat Chicago 4-0 in a game in this series. That's almost unfathomable to me. It's certainly unpronounceable for me. But Minnesota has really kind of established themselves as a team that's going to be tough for years to come. Because Parise, he's in his prime. And Mikko Koivu is still got enough to hang around. Ryan Suter plays 45 minutes a game, it feels like. Mikhail Granlund has been really good. Pominville's been solid. They've got all these young guys that are coming up and they're on the verge of contributing. Can you imagine if they had a goalie?
But they do. He's the leading goalie in the series.
Well, Brizgalov has not been bad, but he's obviously not their goalie of the future.
Oh, no. But if they're going to go deep, it's going to be on his back.
See, I think this is the one team that doesn't really lean on their goalie very much.
He's got them where they are.
He's facing 18, 19 shots a night. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. I'm happy for him. I'm happy for Minnesota. I still don't think this lasts much longer. I do think Chicago at some point is going to wake up. But to your point, they've looked flat kind of all through the playoffs.
Yeah, I watched the games, and I'm just like, I'm bored.
You know, Chicago, well, all right then. Sorry they can't entertain you the way you want to be entertained. Chicago last year when they won the Cup looked like a Stanley Cup team. When they won it over Philadelphia that year, they looked like a Stanley Cup team. They don't look like that right now. They may still get there because they've kind of gotten a path of teams that they should be able to match up well with. So they may not really get beat up until the conference finals, but they don't look like the same Chicago team. Some of that's Minnesota, but some of it is on Chicago too.
In the back of my head, I had to agree with you that if you look at this, you go, oh, Chicago's got this, right? That's just because I expected a Chicago-Colorado series. Didn't happen. I picked Chicago in 7 because I still think they're the better team. And I also picked Chicago in 7 because I knew Minnesota was going to push it to 7. This game will go 7 games, and I think Chicago will win it at home.
Yeah, home ice would be big in Game 7.
Well, where's Game 6?
Game 6 is in Minnesota.
So let's follow Stat Boy's stats.
Wait, am I Stat Boy now? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, you got to tell me who I am.
They haven't lost at home.
No, they haven't.
So I'm saying they're going to go to Mini, tie it up, come back to Chicago.
And lose in Chicago. I was with you in that I thought that Colorado might pose more of a challenge to Chicago simply because they have Varlamov in Minnesota. Briskalov was
and a lot of talent up front.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think in retrospect, Minnesota, and I still don't think they're going to win the series. I hope I'm wrong. But in retrospect, I think they've put up a better fight than Colorado would have against Chicago.
Even with the weak goaltending.
Yeah, because the series is 3-2. It's not over yet. But all 3 of Chicago's wins, Minnesota was in it with 5 minutes left in the game. The last game was 2-1, and it was kind of just a weird goal. I mean, that's what happens in the playoffs. But can you imagine if Minnesota had won Game 5 in Chicago? You want to talk about panic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Blackhawks haven't lost a playoff series in 2 years, and they'd be facing elimination on the road against a team that doesn't lose on their ice.
Well, so we are looking at our Final Four. If our predictions are correct, it'll be Chicago, Anaheim, Boston, Pittsburgh.
And I have Montreal, Pittsburgh. Although, I tell you right now, it sure feels like Boston, New York.
Oof.
I'll stick with Montreal.
The networks would like Boston, New York.
Yeah, these playoffs just in general have been great. There's been one lopsided bad series through the whole playoffs. So NBC's got to be pretty happy with what they've had to work with this year. The only bad series was, I guess, Boston-Detroit was pretty lopsided, but Montreal-Tampa Bay, and that doesn't even feel like that was a playoff series from this year.
No, seems like a long time ago.
Yeah, because it was over so quickly.
Wow.
You're tuned into the Hockey Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Hockey Podcast for even more hockey news.
#do it.
Final segment, news and notes. Let's start with the World Championships as promised last week. What do you got, Doug?
What is news and notes?
You getting philosophical on me?
Yes.
I mean, news and notes is a way to convey to the audience what is going on in this crazy world of hockey that we have.
It's our favorite segment.
Oh, it's your favorite segment.
Oh, come on. You know you love it.
It's all right. It's definitely in my top 3 of segments. Canada lost to France. Explain yourself.
Canada lost to France.
Yes.
Doesn't matter. They're in first place.
But they lost to France. That's got to be worth something.
They were just getting used to the time change.
I have a possible explanation.
Okay.
James Reimer was in net, and he's a Maple Leafs goalie.
Wow.
I don't know if you want to.
Well, he was in net today with a 4-1 lead going into the third, and they won 4-3.
Was that supposed to support my argument or your argument?
Yours.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Not mine. But at the end of the day, in Group A, who's sitting atop the 8 teams?
I don't know. The U.S. is in the tough group, so I've only been looking at that
They're
one.
not. Kazakhstan? Really?
They got Russia.
Latvia? Germany? Come on.
This is
the tough division.
This is Russia's apparently they've been training all year for this tournament.
There's only 2 teams in Group B.
No, that's
Russia and USA.
Finland. Finland wins all the time, except this year in the World Championships, apparently.
Finland hasn't won a game yet.
How dare you bag on Kazakhstan? Look at that multicolored flag that we haven't seen.
It's a very pretty flag.
It's is that like a sky blue?
Kazakhstan has 2 goals for in 2 games.
Now who's Mr. Stat Boy?
Just saying.
You didn't explain why Canada lost to France, but I noticed this when me and the rest of the hockey world turned.
They had too many baguettes
to the World
game
Championships, and we said to ourselves, "Did Canada really just lose to France?" I assume they lost to France's soccer team, but no. Cristobal Huet in net for France. Remember him?
Yes. It was only 1 goal.
Stefan.
It's not like they got blown out 6-1.
DaCosta had a couple. I see what you're hinting at, but I'm not done with my point yet.
Okay.
I looked at Canada's roster, and it is not the overpowering Team Canada you expect to see in international competition.
No.
But that said, they've still got quite a bit of talent on this team, most notably Nathan McKinnon, Sean Monahan, Matt Reed from Philadelphia, Cody Hodgson. It's not the overpowering.
Kyle Turris.
Yeah, Kyle Turris, Jonathan Huberdeau, who's apparently back after taking a year off with the Florida Panthers this season. Mark Scheifele. It's a lot of their good young players. Nazem Kadri, who may or may not be on Toronto next season.
He will be.
We didn't even get into that news and or note when apparently Toronto just wants to trade all their players.
Yeah, including Dion Phaneuf.
So it is a good lineup, but it's not. If you're a Canadian fan, you're spoiled by the lineup of like Taves, Crosby, Stamkos, and that's our second line.
Well, those guys are in the playoffs.
The U.S., well, go ahead.
Except for Stamkos.
Well, as you hinted, the U.S. lost today 6-1 to Russia. I don't have to say anything for myself.
Well, it should be a closer game. They're the 1 and 2 seeds in that group, so I would have figured a 3-2 loss like Canada's lost to France.
Yeah, my comeback is going to be that all the U.S.'s best players are still in the playoffs. How's that?
Wow.
That's going to be my comeback.
Because there's only 10 of them, whereas all the rest of the players are Canadian. So
yeah, that's
why we have
factually not correct. Tyler Johnson leads the way for Team USA with 4 points. That's actually if the U.S. goes, I guess if the U.S. goes, everybody goes to the Olympics in 4 years. NHL players, Tyler Johnson, who won't win Rookie of the Year this year, but at least had a good enough year to get into the finalist conversation, has 4 points already for Team USA.
Yep. He's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on scoring leaders.
So maybe we should explain.
Look who's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the scoring leaders list is Joel Ward.
Mm-hmm. Tied for fourth.
I don't
4 points. Not just for the well, I guess Joel Ward's Canadians, that wouldn't make sense, but that's in the whole thing. Tied with Sergei Kostitsyn, Michael Backlund.
Look who's at the top.
Alex Ovechkin.
Unbelievable.
How is that unbelievable? He's the best, one of the best.
Well, I mean,
in the
he's
world.
just going and going and going. He's played 3 games. He's got 6 points. He's got a game winner. He's got 2 power plays. He's a +4. The boy's a machine.
Viktor Tikhonov, also of Russia, is 1 point behind him with 5 points. Again, Russia put all of this stock in winning the Olympics this year, which obviously didn't happen. How much does this mean to them if they at least win this?
I'd like to check Victor's ice time so far in this tournament compared to the Olympic tournament.
Was that an answer to my question, or was this a whole different thing?
I don't know. It was just a light bulb that went on.
Okay. Well, whatever they're doing, it's working for him. He's got 3 goals and 2 assists. Alex Ovechkin, I feel like he's in the World Championships a lot. Does that mean to say? Does that imply that Washington doesn't go very far in the playoffs every year?
I was going to say that means he's not playing for Washington.
Yeah. I was trying to set it up so you were making the mean statement.
No. I don't make mean statements.
Yeah. That's horribly inaccurate. So the way it works is you play 7 preliminary games, correct? Everybody's going to play 7. This is almost like another full season. This is like an entire college hockey season. And then you get to the playoffs, which is like the medal rounds, and that's pretty standard.
I was watching the games today, and I don't know, that sheet of ice looks bigger than it did in the Olympics. It's massive.
Yeah, well, that's probably why the U.S. lost 6-1.
Just massive. That's why Canada lost to France 3-2.
No, that ice surface was
big ice surface.
Regulated.
It was early in the tournament.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. And it was an overtime loss. It wasn't a loss.
Yeah, that was in like the 7th category of the standings, right? There's like win, overtime win, shootout, overtime
I'm just trying to clarify it. It wasn't like they lost in regulation. It was an overtime loss.
I can't. Well, maybe the U.S. game went to overtime too, and then Russia scored a 5-pointer. I don't know.
No.
I don't have the mental capacity to defend the U.S. and Pittsburgh in the same show. I just can't do it. Somebody's got to start winning at some point.
The man that was going to give up on the game of hockey before we sat down.
No, I wasn't going to give up playing hockey. I was just going to give up watching Pittsburgh in the playoffs.
Okay.
And I might still. Over to the AHL. I'm going to go there.
Yep,
this is like Doug's update time right now.
I love the AHL. They're big audiences.
Toronto's still in it. So I have a feeling
They're up 2-0.
That's why we keep giving updates of this, because the Toronto
Marlies are up 2-0 over Chicago.
Not only are they up 2-0, they swept in the first round too. They're undefeated in the playoffs.
That's awesome.
That's pretty amazing. Good for them.
And over the other two in the Western, Dallas is up 2-0 in theirs over the Griffins.
Okay.
And then we slide over to the east side of the country. St. John's is up 3-1 in their series over the Admirals of...
Well,
the Admirals
those are the Admirals of Milwaukee, Norfolk. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, there's 17 different Admirals.
That's why I set it up that way.
I know. The Norfolk Admirals.
And then, of course, your Penguins are battling it out against Providence. It's
Penguins Bruins.
1-1.
Was hoping we might see that in the NHL, but we may have to settle for Scranton Providence this year. 1-1 Penguins Bruins.
So we got a few games to go before that moves on.
Now I have to root against Toronto there actively, just so I don't have to give updates with you of Toronto winning the Calder Cup. All right, Memorial Cup. This is the one I'm actually, not like I'm not excited about the AHL, but the Calder Cup, as we talked about, or the Memorial Cup, as we talked about last week, really good place to see like the best prospects that are going to be in the NHL as soon as next year.
Yep.
Or if they're not in it next year, you're going to see them drafted this summer.
True. Very true.
So what do we got?
Okay, so let's start in the Western Hockey League. Going into tonight, Monday, May 12th.
2014.
Portland and Edmonton were tied 3-3.
If memory serves me, Portland made it out of the Western Hockey League last year, because I remember Seth Jones being in the Memorial Cup.
Correct. Okay. Well, the Winterhawks didn't make it out this year. Oil Kings win 4-1 and move on to the Mem Cup tournament.
All right.
So, in Ontario Hockey League, that's already been decided. The Guelph Storm won their series 4-1 over the North Bay Battalion.
Never been to Guelph. If I know it's north of here, it sounds cold. If I give you 3 words to describe Guelph, could you do it?
No, I didn't spend a lot of time in Guelph when I lived up there.
So many more than 3 words. That's not even close. It's like 18 words. All right. So that's the scouting report on Guelph. Actually, I've got a scouting report on Guelph.
Give me it.
Here's a couple players you can look out for. Kirby Reichel, first-round pick of the Columbus Blue Jackets last year. And Tyler Bertuzzi, nephew of Todd Bertuzzi.
That poor kid has to carry that name with him.
That's rude.
Why is that rude? His uncle shouldn't be playing.
Well, here we go. I'm not going to...
I'm just saying.
I'm not
I'm just
denying.
saying.
I'm just throwing out some names at you.
People are going to go, oh, he's your uncle.
Well, he has a chance to write his own legacy.
And I hope he does.
So Guelph and the Oil Kings.
Oil Kings. And then we go over to the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. And they play Game 7 tomorrow, May 13th.
Decided yet. Okay.
So they're not decided. They're tied 3-3 with, I know I'm going to butcher it, so apologies up front. Baie-Comeau versus Val-d'Or.
So that will decide the third spot, I guess, but the London Knights are hosting.
Correct.
So they are automatically in. And we saw this a couple years ago with a team that, and we've seen it actually a few times, if you're hosting, you're automatically in. So you get knocked out of your own playoffs, you're still going to the Memorial Cup. And we've seen teams that are only there because they're hosting ultimately end up winning. And certainly London...
Is that weird, or is it just me?
It is kind of weird, but London's got some players. They've got Max Domi, 93 points this season, a plus 24. The Phoenix Coyotes' top prospect. They've got Bo Horvat, 74 points, a plus 20. He's the guy that Vancouver traded Corey Schneider for on draft day. They've got some guys that you're definitely going to see in the NHL as soon as next year.
Okay, so May 16th, when is that?
That's the day after May 15th.
Correct.
Thank you.
But what day of the week is that?
Thursday.
So May 16th, Thursday, the winner of the Q contest tomorrow will play the Knights. The following night, May 17th, the Guelph Storm will face the Edmonton Oil Kings.
Be honest, you like this more than the NHL playoffs, or at least as much.
I love watching this tournament. This tournament is like, it's so much fun to watch.
It is. It's like Canadian hockey at its most Canadian.
And a lot of times, too, is like I remember watching last year and McKinnon tearing it up with the Mooseheads. And
with Jonathan Drouin.
Correct.
Just not fair.
Yes. And I turned to my son, who's a teenage boy, and I went, you realize those guys are only 2 years older than you?
Wake up call.
I mean, it's just like I love watching my kid play hockey, but watching these 17-year-olds. I mean, McKinnon's he's in the World Championship right now because Colorado didn't advance in the NHL.
Through no fault of his.
He's only 18.
Nathan McKinnon is basically less than a year out of high school, and he's by far the NHL Rookie of the Year.
Oh, there's no question. If some writer out there screws that up, he should be fired.
Wow, on the spot. Okay, so I got two very quick news notes for you before we sign off. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
You touched on the Dion Phaneuf trade rumors. We don't have to go into them. But as a
then why bring it up?
Maple Leaf supporter, I'm giving you the platform here.
Okay.
Do you want Dion Phaneuf back, or do you think that he's somebody you may have to move to get the pieces that you need? Are you waving to me or Dion?
If they trade him and get something for him, I'm okay with that.
Just anything? It doesn't matter if they're good?
I'm not a Dion Phaneuf fan.
Doesn't sound like it.
No.
Okay. All right.
And I can see why they want to move him.
Well, I mean, a big, rugged defenseman like that's going to be a hot commodity on the open market.
But here's the question. You just signed him to an extension.
Well, I didn't. They did.
They did.
No, that's not a question either. That's a statement.
Okay.
Glad we got that cleared up.
This is a question. Was that a statement?
I need to make a statement on that question. Barry Trotz interested in the Capitals and Canucks jobs. Where's he a better fit?
He's a better fit in Washington.
I hope he goes to Washington.
He's a better fit.
The picture that they have posted here, he does not look like he wants to go to Washington. I don't think the Western Conference honestly can handle another just quality coach, and Barry Trotz is. And if he goes to Vancouver, there's not any bad teams in the Western Conference. Like, if you think about it, the 8 teams that made the playoffs this year, there's not going to be much drop-off.
No.
Phoenix was right there. Nashville really wasn't that far off, and they had Peter Laviolette. So right there, you already have 10 legitimate playoff contenders. If Winnipeg ever decides to get a goalie, I don't think they're a playoff team, but they're at least
pushing.
A team.
They're pushing.
So then it's just Calgary, Vancouver, Edmonton. If Vancouver gets Barry Trotz, they're going to be better again. So you're now to Calgary and Edmonton, and Calgary's on the way up.
So you're looking at it from a Western Conference fan.
Yes, because all the good coaches go to the West.
Well, that's a good thing.
How is that a good thing? That's a question.
That's a question. I think he's a better fit in Washington. That's an answer.
I would be interested to see what he could do with Ovechkin and that team. Because, look, we joke about it, mainly you, because you're kind of mean.
Whoa.
It's great to see, at this time of year, Alex Ovechkin playing in at least the second round of the playoffs. How long has it been?
Right.
Like, you want to talk about underachieving, and I'm not saying it's all him, but the Washington Capitals should be one of the final 8 teams every year.
But do you hire your coach before you hire a GM?
Well, this may not happen until June.
You better have a GM soon. Drafts in June.
Yeah, you do have to have a GM for the draft. We talked about that last week as far as you may not have to have a coach for the draft, but you
gotta have a GM.
You gotta have a GM, yeah. So they may want to get on that in Washington. That's it for episode 40. Join us next week as we dive into hockey's version of the Final Four. Will it be the same 4 teams as it was last season, Doug?
Ooh, good question. We'll also continue to follow the progress of our teams abroad in the IIHF World Championship.
Plus, whatever else happens in the next 7 days. Thanks for listening to the Hockey Podcast.